So it's right in the heart of London, and it's the theatre district. So it's where the bars, the restaurants, the theatres are, and some of our theatres are 300, 400 years old, have been on those sites for all of that time. Theatre or Drury Lane, you can read people's accounts from the early 1700s of appearing on stage there. And the West End represents our big shows. You know, the smallest West End theatre I think is 450 seats, the largest is about 2,500. They play everything from plays all the way through to Lion King, Wicked, the great big musicals. But what's lovely is it's a very small, it's probably 3 square miles in the centre, right in this heart of the city. So it has a sense, right next to Covent Garden, it has a sense of kind of the bustling entertainment district, which is really special. And I think there's also massive variety on offer. There's dance shows, there's musicals, there's very serious plays, there's new plays, there's old plays, there's Hollywood stars, there's breakthrough actors, everybody all occupying the same space.
Hello, my name is Holly Race-Rowan. I'm the Artistic Director of Headlong Theatre Company, and today we're going to talk about my production of Henry V at Shakespeare's Globe. So, Michelle Terry, the Artistic Director of Shakespeare's Globe, where we are sat today, pitched this idea to me because I was very interested in creating a piece of work that was in conversation with what it means to be British in 2022. We're now in 2023. And I read Henry V, and my first response was, this is a very long play with a lot of men in it who come on and talk about war and then leave the stage. And I'm a director of new writing, so I approached it as I would do a new play, and I thought if Shakespeare was alive today and I was going to meet him in Starbucks this afternoon, what would be my notes for him on this play? And those were thoughts I had were around the structure of the play, around the psychology of Henry V, and feeling like I wanted to understand who that character was more and what motivated that character. I also felt that there were characters in it who didn't earn their place. They might come in, say a couple of lines, and then you never see them again. And part of my job as the director of this play was to put a team together around me who are smarter than me to help me grapple with some of those dramaturgical questions about the play and edit it for 2022, 2023. So me and a playwright called Cordelia Lynn, who I've made a lot of work with, sat down with these notes and questions I had about this play and edited the script in a way that addressed those notes. So we merged some characters together. We changed some characters around so that a good example of that is there is a character called Lord Scroop of Masham who we brought earlier on in the play, in order that when he dies later in the play, you feel something because you care about him because you've met him earlier. We also nicked a bit of Henry IV Part 2, which is this extraordinary scene between Henry and his dad, Henry V and his dad, Henry IV. And we stuck that at the top of our production in order for us to really understand the psychology behind Henry V and what motivates him. So it's quite a harrowing scene between father and son, where you see a father really bully his son. And then in our production, you see Henry V go on to bully his soldiers and in a bigger way bully France. And you understand why he might behave the way he does, because we have given him a childhood on stage, if you like.
So the play is about a young king who basically inherits England after his dad dies. And we're looking at kind of his first real event as king, which is to take back the crown of France, because there is a law that he's looked into which basically says he should be the King of France. So he decides that he's gonna go ahead with that plan, and essentially that's what the play is for the next sort of 2.5 hours, is will Henry become the King of France again? They go to battle and war against each other, and that's the play, basically. It was actually one of the first plays that I saw when I went to college, so when I was like 16 years old in Manchester. and we studied it for school. And probably like all kind of students, you think, oh, I have to go and see this play. But I loved it. It was at the Royal Exchange, so it was in the round, and they had this like metal platform that would raise up at different points, and then during once more into the breach, it kind of was at this angle, and Henry was at the top shouting at his soldiers to come up and all that kind of thing. It was yeah, I really remember it. And I'm not going to say like that's the play that kind of made me become an actor, but when I would watch things like that, I would go, oh, like I want to be a part of that world that they're all doing.
I think what is unique about this production is its relationship to this specific space. It's a very unique space, it's candlelit, but also that it's very small, and it's very, very intimate. So what that means is for a play that's essentially a war play, you know, we pretty much get into war and then we're going. What that, I think our show's trying to kind of aesthetically ask the question, how do you create a war in a very small space and with very little extra, you know, props or kind of support, technical support. So really, how can you just create that feeling of violence and fear and all of the kind of complex emotions that come with war in a space that's actually quite bare and also very intimate. So I think that is different to other productions. Yeah, and in general, I think the kind of the spareness of it, it's quite short compared to some, which some people would, you know, say is a bad thing. Some would say is good, but it's quite fast and snappy, and there's been quite a radical cut to the script and an edit. So that means that just kind of content-wise, there's a difference there. Yeah.
I think you're always going to have your own point of view, and I think that for us as a company, like probably any production, I think you can't get away from the question of like, what is this English narrative that is so prevalent in the play? I don't think we can get away from the fact that many people know some of these speeches, Once More Into the Breach and St. Crispin's Day, and some of the lines that are in it. You know, I'm a big football fan, and we spoke about how, you know, Once More Into the Breach will be played before big football matches sometimes. So it really has this mythology of what England is. And so we are interrogating that, and interrogating that in, you know, 2022, 2023, and how that kind of is in conversation with the world outside of this room. So in a way, like, I don't think there's too much we have to layer on. I think one thing in this production in particular that I think we've really pulled out is those questions around Henry of, is he a hero, or is he someone that went into this war, went into this battle kind of to prove himself, and actually gets quite lucky. And as much as it is a triumph that he wins, was it a bad decision? Like, how good was this decision politically in the world of the play? So I think that's something that we've looked at. I also think that the introduction or the pulling out of Henry IV and how that succession of kings and how Henry IV became the king is really interesting that we start the play with, because ultimately, what does it mean when you are a young man who suddenly gets given this huge responsibility that may well have been gained through indirect and crooked means, as Henry IV says. So I think we definitely put a magnifying glass on that as well.
So I play two characters, and the Queen of France is, as her title suggests, the Queen of France. And in our version, she's sort of given actually more to do than in the kind of original version. She doesn't really appear as much. And she is, in our version, a kind of quite a powerful political negotiator. She is the one that is really trying to push everyone to kind of make peace at the end of the play, and where her husband, the king, feels kind of more resistant. So she's clearly got this kind of diplomatic skill. She's like a kind of highly skilled person, is kind of the version that we're telling, who operates in a political space and, you know, is quite kind of bold and fearless in that way. The other important thing about her is her relationship with her daughter, Catherine, which we see right at the end of our version of the play. And that relationship is really special. And historically, interestingly, the King of France, the original King of France, he was really unwell for a lot of his life. He was very mentally unwell and would often be out of action for kind of large parts of the year. So she actually would, that there's lots of reports and diaries and all this sort of thing where actually she really did step up and, you know, take the lead. So yeah, a strong player. And the Prince of France, Louis, is her son. So I'm playing my own son. And he is, in our version and in a lot of versions, there's a certain arrogance to him. So it's really fun playing those two parts because she's quite clear and kind of really switched on to the political kind of manoeuvring. And he is a little bit more kind of away with the fairies and doing his own thing, slightly self-interested. But what we really tried to do is find the humanity in him. Often in Louis can be kind of sent up and is played kind of purely for the kind of the comedy. And there's a little bit of that, but what we've really tried to do is kind of actually say, oh, who is this person? And yeah, and how is he really kind of feeling and reacting? So yeah, it's a really fun pairing. We haven't got time travel yet, but I'm thinking, I'm not thinking of myself, but I'm thinking of the kind of the feeling of, I mean, I don't have a son myself, but I'm summoning up all the kind of usual imaginative work, but I don't see my own face in the envisioning of it, which I think would be quite weird. And what's useful in our version, they're quite separate. So she really comes in at the end of the play, and he's kind of comes through the first sort of section. So I'm able to compartmentalize it a bit, but it's still weird.
What I think is extraordinary about Shakespeare is these seminal productions of Shakespeare stick in the public's imagination. So the Laurence Olivier version of this play that was made into a film, or the Kenneth Branagh film, and when you come to the text, you realise that quite often what is held in the public consciousness about the play isn't actually in the text, it's from a seminal production. So when I went back to the text, I had this idea that this character of Catherine was kind of light and fluffy and silly. And then I read it in the text and I felt like the opposite. And that's what I've tried to pull out in this production. And by switching the role of her maid, I think it was her maid originally in the text, and giving those lines to the Queen of France, her mother, we've created a bookend for our production which opens with a father-son relationship and it closes with a mother-daughter relationship. And I've moved that very famous Catherine scene to the very end of the play to leave us with these questions of how are women affected by male violence, both on a domestic level at home in terms of enforced marriage, which this play obviously deals with, but also in a kind of wider context of war. How are women impacted by war? And I hope by moving that scene to the end of the play, we are leaving an audience to hold those questions in mind.
There's a scene at the end of the play. We don't see much of them together on stage, but what we do is very, very intimate, very, hopefully kind of a very moving depiction of their relationship and the closeness that they share. Because essentially what's happening and what we see is that Catherine's mother, me, the Queen of France, has to essentially give her daughter away, sell her daughter to Henry as part of this peace treaty. So as a mother, and you know, Catherine is young, we've kind of decided she's about 18, but really she would have been much younger than that probably. So but she knows she has to do it to create peace, but also she loves her daughter and there's a closeness there. They're both quite kind of strong-willed. And we've tried to create little moments where we see, just through a kind of simple gesture or a simple moment, we see that closeness, even though we don't get the kind of backstory. And there aren't very many women in the play. There's literally the two of them, really. So I think there's something quite charged just automatically about the fact it's just a scene between two women and that there aren't any others like that in the play or in our version of the play. So it's special and it's devastating because she, you know, has to put her daughter into a marriage that she's pretty sure is going to be very unhappy. So but it's really fun to play that as an actor because it's really juicy, yeah.
So I play Prince Thomas, who is Henry's brother. He would be the brother that would inherit the crown if Henry died without a child. I'm multi-role, so I also play Gower, who is an English soldier, and I also play Orléans, who is obviously on the French side, who in our production has a very close relationship with Louis, Prince Louis, and he is kind of he's like got the ear of Prince Louis in our production. Yeah, it's a great challenge physically and mentally because it's also for me about how I portray this physically on stage. So I think that I will maybe have different gestures for different characters that just key me into that like mindset. But I also think it's also feels completely normal. It feels completely natural. It feels like when you're a kid and you just go out and play with your friends and you go, okay, I'm going to be this character and you be that one. Okay, cool, let's switch, you know? And especially in this space, which is quite intimate, and a lot of the actors are on stage for a lot of the time, so we do just get up and play, jump into the middle, and then jump back out and jump back in. So yeah, it feels a challenge, but then also really fun. For me, it's more about knowing that we're all imaginatively creating the performance. Like, I am offering something out there, but if the audience aren't invested in it, the play doesn't really happen for me. You know, so for example, you know, spoiler alert, people die in this play. Whereas on screen, you can kind of have all the special effects and that kind of thing. We don't have that here. So the audience have to invest in that. And we're looking directly into the audience's face and saying, look, you have to be a part of that. And I think Shakespeare really understood that really well, especially in this play, because he knows that we're having to tell a story about a huge war that spans over years and years, and there's battlefields and there's horses, and we don't have any of that here. It's literally a wooden stage. So we really need the audience to come along on that adventure with us.
Yeah, it's totally challenging. I made a play in here a year before, which was all direct address to the audience. and it was really funny, and it had songs in it, and it had great props. And then I came back and I've made a very serious drama that doesn't speak to the audience at all and isn't funny and has no props. And this space is extraordinary and democratic, and the audience want to be spoken to. And creating a show that is hyper naturalistic and all about psychology took some adjustment that we adapted over previews in order to take the audience on that journey, because I think the expectation of what they were going to get and what we'd made is slightly different, but they're now really with us, and it's a total delight. But it's a challenging space because it demands actor-audience relationship, and we've made a show with a fourth wall up, which means we're not interacting with the audience, and we had to kind of make the work even more vivid and even tenser and tauter to earn the right to not talk to them, if that makes sense. So I think what's been extraordinary about making the show, and I'm very excited to take it on tour, is there's not a spare breath in it, and the actors understand their intention with such clarity and vividness for every single line, because we weren't allowed to phone any of it in, because the audience basically wanted to be involved, and that was our way of involving them, was going, okay, but we'll make sure it's really, really good.
I think it's probably the most beautiful theatre that I've performed in. I love how I can see everyone in the audience because of the candlelight, and you really do feel like there's an exchange between the audience and what's happening on stage. So that kind of aliveness that you only get in theatre, like, has to happen in here. You know, there's no screen, you know, blocking us. There's no darkness out there that means you can't connect with the audience. Yeah, it's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed playing it.
Lay on the king. I must bear all.
Henry V is about power.
It's about one man, a king, and a small group of people inflicting war on another country and their own people.
The other thing that we're sort of trying to explore is Henry as an anti-hero.
Henry's probably always been viewed as, you know, very patriotic, very heroic. Whereas this kind of pulls that back and goes, hang on, there are two sides here.
We're questioning if he's really that much of a hero, what it means to be a king. We're questioning basically everything.
It's so interesting to do a play like Henry V, to bring something that's on an epic scale on the page into somewhere that is profoundly intimate, just does something really interesting.
Because the audience are so close, you're complicit in so much of the action.
I think you will literally feel the blood, sweat and tears.
We're hoping that audiences leave with questions about our national identity, our sense of myth-making, what Englishness means.
Dive in to an imaginative journey that is visceral,
Thrilling, powerful and violent.
Lean, and it's fresh.
Exciting, energetic and intense.
Urgent and human.